Hello there, everyone. It is Monday, March 4th. The weekend has come and gone, and this is my UFC 235 reaction video. I'm just going to give a quick rundown of the main card and give some thoughts on each and every bout moving forward. So let's just jump right into it. In the main event, John Bones Jones retained his UFC Light Heavyweight Championship over the very game Anthony Lionheart Smith via unanimous decision, 48-44 across all judges' scorecards. If that scorecard sounds a little funny to you, it'll be because he got 2 points deducted during the fight. We'll get to that in a bit. So thoughts on the fight? Very dominant performance from John Jones, albeit underwhelming, if I'm just being frank. And that's not a knock on him or even a knock on Anthony Smith. I think it's just when you are regarded by many as not just the greatest light heavyweight of all time, but the greatest fighter in the history of MMA, there's a certain set of expectations that fans and media expect you to live up to. And when you don't live up to it, for better or for worse, fair or not, people start questioning you when you don't finish a guy that many people thought shouldn't have even been in this fight. In fact, John Jones is such a dominant champion that Anthony Smith basically got a title shot because he was just the next one in the queue. Over the years in John Jones' championship careers, he faced a who's who in MMA. And we're talking legends, top contenders, and he ran through them. So we're talking Leo Machida, Rampage Jackson, Shogun for the belt when he first got it. Daniel Cormier twice, even though the second one was overturned. I mean, so there's some doubt being casted about his level of motivation. Maybe not necessarily motivation, but his approach. I mean, was he trolling us? Was he fighting down to his competition? And only he knows what is in his heart. But we have eyes, and it looked like John Jones was going through the motions despite looking so dominant. Because as the fight progressed, it got worse and worse for Anthony Smith. It just got to that point where you were looking at things where you're just like, this doesn't need to continue. And to Anthony Smith's credit, in the build up to the fight, he said that he was not going to be mentally broken by John Jones. He was not scared of him, and he also said he was going to make John Jones fight him. Unfortunately for Anthony Smith, he only got to do one of those two things. He did show his lion heart, as corny as that sounds, and his grit. He wasn't going to quit, which was exemplified, as I'm about to explain, with the point deductions that I mentioned earlier. Late in the fight, John Jones hit him with an illegal strike, hit a knee down to a downed opponent, and referee Herb Dean felt that it was intentional. And Anthony Smith, that moment came when he could make history and become the light heavyweight champion if he decided that he couldn't continue. If he told the ref he couldn't continue, or perhaps if the ref thought he couldn't continue, he was going to win that fight via disqualification and become light heavyweight champion, which I didn't even realize could happen. Or maybe it was the case the whole time, I just didn't know, which is my mistake. But he told the ref he can continue and took his loss. So kudos to him, even though he probably left a very lucrative rematch on the table. It's hard to say what I would have done in the same situation, but I commend him for sticking to his principles. But once again, we have someone coming for the throne and coming up just short. So moving right along, in the co-main event, in which the only championship changed hands, Kamaru Usman defeats Tyron Woodley via unanimous decision to become the new UFC welterweight champion. And he did it in stunningly dominant fashion. I mean, if you didn't know any better watching this fight, Kamaru Usman was the one defending the title, and that Tyron Woodley was the challenger. It was that one-sided. Um, in fact, Tyron Woodley's a Division One wrestler. Kamaru Usman's a Division Two wrestler. If I were to show you that fight without giving you any context as to who's who would you would have thought Kamaru was Division One guy. It was that type of fight. I mean, to take a I don't want to I hate disrespecting Tyron Woodley to this extent, but it's almost as if he didn't even get off the bus. I mean, which it's all credit to Usman. This guy, I felt he had a good chance to win the title. He was that highly rated, in my opinion. 14, 13, and 1, undefeated in the UFC. I thought he had a good chance, but I thought the experience of Tyron Woodley was going to pull him through. You know, Tyron Woodley had been running through the welterweight division, you know, top contender after top contender, and was well on his way to becoming arguably, at the very least, the second greatest welterweight ever. Champion, that is. And man, Kamaru Usman made it look easy. A star-making performance of the highest degree. I don't even... The last one-sided title challenger performance like that was probably Rafael dos Anjos versus Anthony Pettis at UFC 185, or Randy Couture, Tim Sylvia, but that was mainly because Randy Couture's age factored in. Everyone was like, man, there's no way he's going to beat a much younger, bigger guy, but this one was like prime stuff from Kamaru Usman, the first African-born welterweight champion. Man, a star was born last Saturday, man. It's phenomenal stuff. Moving right along, in the third featured bout of the night, another welterweight contest between Robbie Lawler, the former welterweight champion, and the debuting Ben Askren, the former Bellator welterweight champ, former ONE welterweight champ, one of the best welterweights in the world that wasn't in the UFC, if not maybe the best welterweight in the world, period. And this fight was a barn burner. Ben Askren defeats Robbie Lawler by a technical submission, a bulldog choke, but it was controversial because Robbie Lawler did not tap. The ref erroneously thought that he passed out and stopped the fight, which is frustrating on many levels. But most importantly, it also takes away from Ben Askren's performance, because we're talking about the first 30 seconds of this fight. Ben Askren shot for a takedown. Robbie Lawler stuffed it and then proceeded to dump him on his head, angle slam style. If you're a pro wrestling fan, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And then got wrist clutch and proceeded to beat the living hell out of Ben Askren, to the point where I think in any other fight, a stoppage would have been more than justified. In fact, many who were watching thought the fight should have been stopped. But Ben Askren, I don't know if his face is made of titanium, but the punches he took, listen, Robbie Lawler has nuclear power in his hands. And you don't take a beating the way Ben Askren did and survive it, and somehow he did. And the fact that he was able to get Robbie Lawler in the position to put him in a bulldog submission was unbelievable. But anyways, in a strange way, that was actually kind of the ideal scenario when you really think about it, you know? When you come into the UFC as highly touted as Ben Askren, the last thing you want is for the new guy to get embarrassed by the UFC star. But also, to the various degree, you don't want the UFC star, the UFC, the stalwart, to be embarrassed by the new guy. So, in many ways, this kind of evened out for both. Both looked great. Somebody had to lose. But if you were going to lose in controversial fashion, right? So you can run it back at a later date, if not immediately. Because this also fits because, heading into the fight, there was this narrative going around that Ben Askren had perpetuated. And a lot of people thought, too, that Ben was afraid that people were going to think if he had beaten Robbie Lawler, that Robbie Lawler was going to be washed up. And that no one was going to give Ben Askren the credit he deserved for beating Robbie Lawler, which I thought was complete nonsense. Robbie Lawler in the last 5 years has only lost 3 fights, 2 of them in title fights, all 3 to current or former UFC champions. So I didn't buy that narrative at all. This was about as legit a test as you could get. I mean, whoever came out of it was going to be in a good position for a shot at the welterweight title. And I think it it was the bet from a promotional perspective, from a pure promotional perspective. You couldn't ask for a better result, so to speak. Moving right along, in the only women's bout in the main card, Weili Zhang upsets strawweight stalwart Tisha Torres. Um, this was this was a stunning upset to me because of Tisha Torres' experience. Not necessarily in fights, because Weili Zhang has more fights than her. In terms of level of competition, Tisha Torres has been taking on the upper echelon of strawweight for years. Weili Zhang was coming over from China. She's won 18 straight, and her biggest win to date was over Pioneer Jessica Aguilar in her last fight. So this was a huge step up in competition to see if she really did belong up there in the top against the top 10 at strawweight, and she passed with flying colors, getting the unanimous decision. A fun fight at times, but overall just not the greatest fight. But it showed me some things about what Weili Zhang was made of, and I was very impressed. It should be very interesting to see how she moves on, who she gets next, and how far she can get in the strawweight division. For Tisha Torres, once again, it's another tough break. She never gets easy fights, and I don't think she ever wants to have easy fights. But man, coming off a loss against Joanna Jacek, I mean, in my opinion, she should have gotten a title shot instead of fighting Joanna Jacek. But she's clearly still one of the upper echelon strawweights in the world, and I think she'll be fine. It's just going to be a minor setback. And now moving right along to the opening bout, a bantamweight contest between former champion Cody Garbrandt and up-and-comer Pedro Munoz. And this was a barn burner. Cody Garbrandt got suckered into a firefight at the end of the first round against Pedro Munoz and paid for it. Pedro Munoz knocked him out. Well, stopped him. Not knocked him out. He stopped him. And it was stunning because it's a third consecutive stoppage loss for Cody Garbrandt, and he's still so young, coming off 2 consecutive knockout losses to TJ Dillashaw. It was stunning. But then again, at the same time, I think we have to give Pedro Munoz his due, right? If you look at the exchanges that they were going through, it was insane. Cody Garbrandt is known for his boxing. He's known for his chin. He's known for his punching power. And the fact that Pedro Munoz was able to stand in there with him and trade blow for blow and make it through, because not a lot of people can stand in the pocket with Cody Garbrandt and leave with their conscience intact. It was incredible. So maybe we need to start paying Pedro Munoz his due. Maybe he's just simply one of the best bantamweights in the world, and we just haven't acknowledged it. But man, did he ever make a statement with this win. It was incredible, and it leaves us wondering what's next for Cody Garbrandt, because, well, as I mentioned, he's still so young. He's not washed up. I mean, there's talks that his chin may be gone, and I don't know if I can subscribe to that yet. I just think it was one of those situations where he met an opponent, which ironically enough I believe he picked to fight. I'm not saying that he was trying to take an easy route, but he, after coming off 2 consecutive title fights, probably tried to decide, like, hey, let me get somebody in the middle to the lower part of the bantamweight division. And man, he paid for it. Again, he paid for it. But such is the way MMA is, right? So that's it for my main card reactions. As for the entire card itself, it was a really solid card. B plus, I guess, if I had to give it a grade. It was quite a hodgepodge of an event. The Fight Pass prelims and the ESPN portion of the prelims both had stellar knockouts and stoppages, and it got the night off to a really good start. And again, heading into the main card with Cody and Pedro, it was, you thought it was just going to be, man, is this going to be the rest of the night? And and then it kind of waned off with a couple of decisions, and the Robbie Lawler Askren decision, which kind of soured everybody because of how bad of a stoppage it was. And of course, as much as I enjoy the co-main and main event, to a lot of casual fans, I can understand the perspective of like, what, those were very underwhelming to borderline boring. So it's understandable. But then again, this was also a transitional card, a bridge to a bigger tentpole event. I mean, it showed with the matchmaking. You had a lot of established names facing no-namers. To see how to move divisions along, and I thought that was the right call by the UFC. I like the matchmaking. People could scoff at like, oh man, the UFC fed Lionheart to John Jones, but sometimes that's the way it is when a division lacks a certain amount of depth. Sometimes it is just the next person in line, and I felt that this card accomplished those things where it moved divisions along. It established new, if not stars, at least new contenders, or at least determined where veterans placed themselves in these things. So, but yeah, overall it was a really solid card, and it fun night of fights, man. If you liked MMA, this was a solid card. It really was. So that'll be it. Thanks for tuning in and listening, or if not, whatever. It's here for posterity's sake. I'll try to keep this up whenever I can, depending on card. I'll, post about pro wrestling, MMA, life, sports in general, whatever, so keep it tuned in whenever you guys can. I appreciate all of you who tuned in. So thanks a lot and have a good night.